Hi, my name is Maria Hallman, and I teach at DeKalb High School in Waterloo, Indiana. I'm going to go ahead and get my presentation loaded, and while I'm doing that, I'm going to inform you just a little bit about myself. I've been teaching for 17 years, and I am super excited to be a part of the Physical Education Summit this weekend with you. So I am going to talk to you about how to educate your community through simple displays and larger health fairs. My dear colleague, Cassie Brooks, and I'm not sure how many of you know of Cassie, but she's amazing as well. She's from Brownsburg, Indiana. Her and I presented on this topic at the PE Summit, or not the PE Summit, the PE Institute in Asheville in July. And so when you click on this link and some of these links, you might actually find some of her information in this as well. So just a heads up, she's another resource that you are more than welcome to ask. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I'm in Waterloo, Indiana, which is in Northeast Indiana. I'm about 20 minutes away from Michigan and 20 minutes away from Ohio. I am the 2016 Indiana Health Teacher of the Year, and I am the InShape, which is our Indiana Shape America Association. I'm the conference director, so I'm super excited to put on an amazing conference in November at Grand Park, which is the Colts training facility as well. So if you have nothing else to do in November 3rd, 4th, or 5th, feel free to check us out, and we'd love to have you. So when we're thinking about how to educate the maybe the younger generation, I keep moving this around trying to find a good spot there. When we think about educating our younger generations, and especially the elementary students, I got into this rut because I was doing the same things, worksheets, flashcards, reading the textbook, and I got bored, and I hate being bored. And then I got put, I don't want to say I got, I chose, because I really did, to be in the health classroom full time. I was part-time PE and part-time health. And so the moment I went to full-time health, I knew I needed to do something different because I, like I said, get bored. And so I decided to look at how am I going to teach these skills-based health, or these health skills-based standards a little bit better to my students and throw away the textbooks. I don't do that anymore. No more textbooks for me. So I wanted to just really think outside the box. How can my students be the most effective, advocate for themselves, and to learn without me having to do all the teaching? Because in the end, they need to figure out how to be a better lifelong learner themselves than just always with me. Cassie and I do a great job of supporting each other through this. There's a few other people I love reaching out to for some ideas or just found some inspiration. I follow tons of amazing educators online, so feel free to look into resources. But when I started looking at how can I make my curriculum a little bit different, it came down to this. My elementary students were not getting health education like they needed to, and it was so frustrating. They get up to the high school level where I'm at, and they've had maybe 1-2 classes at most. That's not even the full 18 weeks. So we're looking at 18 weeks, give or take a few, their entire K through 9, or 8 education. And then I'm supposed to have all this knowledge already, set for them. And they're like, I don't even know what you're talking about. Endocrine what? So I decided that in order for my elementary students to get used to seeing health a little bit more than what they were, I put on a health fair for the elementaries in my district. We have a little background, just so you know. I have, at the high school, there's only one high school in my district, and then there's one middle school, and there are 4 elementaries. So this past year, in 2018-19, I chose to go to 2 of our elementaries. Just got the go-ahead today, actually, to go to the other 2 elementaries this school year. So I'm super excited that within 2 years, every student at DeKalb Central United School District in the elementaries, really the 1st through 5th grade, will be a part of this health fair, obviously, unless they were absent that day. But I know that the elementary teachers lack the consistency in the health content. It's not their fault. They're meeting their standards, they're meeting their principals' expectations and their rigor. but they're missing the health component. And they don't think of it as being so simple to just weave in. The middle schools are struggling just because of it's more physical education focused, which isn't a bad thing. I love my PE teachers. I'm one of those as well. But when we're missing the health component at the high school level, it's so key to have it implemented at the middle school. So what I did was I chose to kind of have a plan of attack. What does my plan look like? So first, who's my target audience? I wanted to get that 1st through 5th graders. I just simply emailed out to the principals and said, here's my idea. My first year, I really had to go to the schools and pitch the idea. First, I had to pitch it to my principals to make sure, hey, can I take my students on field trips to the elementaries? Because that's what I chose to do. You could make it where the elementaries come to you at your high school or your middle school. So I really had to sell it. I had to have my vision in place. So this is why I'm giving you what my vision was. Feel free to tweak it. Feel free to contact me and say, hey, I have this idea instead. I might love it. I might take it. Or you can totally just ask me questions anytime. My key was to look at the health standards for the elementaries. I knew one of those principals well enough, who actually is now my principal at the high school. I knew his first question was, well, what health standards are you covering? And my answer was all of them. I'm going to cover as many of those health topics and health standards for you and for your teachers that those teachers are going to walk away going, whoa, they like literally did my job. Yeah, my students did your job for you. And you got to like walk around, take a breather, and feel a little bit more re-energized. Plus, I gave them talking points afterwards. So then I chose topics related to the standards. I looked at, for Indiana, we have 1st and 2nd, and then we have 3rd, 4th, 5th. I made a list of the topics, which I will show you here in a little bit. I decided how long the project's going to take. This was a huge, like, it ranged. Fall semester, I did all of this at the end of the semester, like in December, right before Christmas. And it worked out okay. I was pleased with it. But then 2nd semester rolled around and I couldn't wait till May because we have so much state testing, and I'm sure some of you are in the same boat, that it was just near impossible. So I actually moved it up to right after spring break, and I actually loved it more. So this year, I'm doing this right after our fall break, so that'll be towards the end of October. And I wanted it to break up the semester because I feel like students at the end are already stressed enough with finals and this end of the year projects or semester projects for teachers. And it just wasn't the best learning environment for my students. So you have to figure out how long is it going to take, how much time are you going to give them. So first semester got a little bit longer, 2nd semester didn't. And they actually did so much better 2nd semester with a short amount of time, but it was more important that it was at the right time of the semester for the students. So figure that out for you. And then I am in a district that we have e-learning. If you're not familiar with e-learning, it's when we have a day off, which I know some of you watching are probably going, you have days off. We have snow days, we have fog days. Those are the main ice days. We had a lot of ice last year, but we had a whole, and especially in the spring, we had like 10 or 11 days off where we had to implement e-learning. By 9 a.m., I had to have a lesson ready for my students. And I did a lot of this prep work for the health fair as my e-learning. The best part was it made my superintendent and my school board and even my principals and other teachers look at my curriculum and what I was doing, because it got presented at a school board and said, I was able to take this health fair and this topic and make it go all the way through. It was a continuous project, even through e-learning. I was able to master something that was continuously learning, even though we were in school. And so that was a huge key for my principals and a lot of the school board members to see that, hey, if she can do it, a lot of other students or a lot of other teachers can. So what did I do? And I will make sure that we post this as well. And actually the bit.ly was at the beginning, so you're more than welcome to see this. But when you click on these, what I did was I chose the topics, and I am going to take you to them. I have one sheet per class. And basically how I set it up is first period is in charge of 1st graders. I don't have a 2nd, so 3rd period is in charge of 3rd graders, 4th period is in charge of 4th graders, 5th is in charge of 5th, but my 6th hour, they're in charge of my 2nd graders. So I looked at the 1st period, first grade standards. And so I went through and I looked at the 1st standard, talked about guidance counselors and childhood injuries. And then we talked about emotions. So I split it up where they were able to identify different specific topics. Now I'm going to reorganize these. I'm going to redo some of them because I'm on some of these amazing health Facebook groups and Twitter groups, and people are asking about questions. I'm like, ooh, I kind of like that one. But within this, the best part is when it comes to goal setting, I don't care how my students present goal setting, just present on goal setting. Figure out what you want to do. First aid, if you want to focus more on CPR, you can focus more on CPR and first aid. If you want to just stick with bandages and things like that, that's fine. But I really stress to my students, make sure it is grade appropriate. Grade appropriate. Do we really need to know everything that your diaphragm deals with in first grade for the respiratory system? Probably not, but they sure do need to know just what the basic lungs do and how are, like, what are some things that go on for a first grader. Maybe they start having asthma, maybe they're getting wheezy, maybe they have they've had bronchitis, those type of things. So I make sure that within the topic, my students have so much choice and options, they don't even know where to go. Typically, that is the problem for a lot of them. Then I have them do a KWL. What do you know? And this is just 4 to 5 sentences summarizing what do they already know about the health fair topic. For me, the first day we had off in the spring semester, so it was during the winter, my students knew this was coming. 9 a.m., I had kids ready to go because we're supposed to post our lessons by 9 a.m., and they were putting in their names for their topics. That was great because they were getting ones that interested them. If they were kind of late to the party, then they were late to the party and they didn't get the one that they were wanting. But it got them actively involved and engaged in choosing topics that interest them. I didn't want it just to be I assign a topic to you because they may not do as well. I focused on standards, and I am big on teaching my standards to my students. I'm looking at my schedule and it's already next week. I start school tomorrow with my students, and next week we are digging into our health standards. Like, they know them and they can tell you not necessarily what standard 1.2.1 is, but they can tell you what standard 1 is, and they know what core concepts is, and they know what goal setting is. They know what advocacy is, and that's so important to me. So I have them do a standard document sheet. We've already discussed the standards. So I have them go and they put their name, they put their health fair topic down, and the first one is just an example to refer to. So they go through, if they're doing second grade, they will have the second grade standard right here, the number, they have to do the description, and then why did you choose this health standard? What information could you teach the students that meet the standard? It's important to find the why behind it. I do make my students include the standards on their poster and their display because it is important for the elementary teachers and the elementary principals to see that, hey, we did cover these standards for you. And so that way my kids aren't just winging it. And then next to each standard, like I said, they'll write down the topic and then they'll research the websites. We've already talked about good accessing resources. So they're finding valid health information rather than just going to a general Google search. They are going to specific websites relating to their topic, and they are also asking some professionals that are within our district as well. The next thing is, I love doing this one. I have them create a dream board. What do you want to include? If money was no object, if time was no object, what do you want to include? Are you going to use technology, activities? I expect my students to have an interactive piece for their health fair, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. But for me, and even the interactive piece would be to create an apron with them, or in this one, I just chose the digestive system. They have to match. They could have them match the different parts of the digestive system. I put on some materials that they may need to have, and what do I want them to learn? But I have them do this dream board because if they don't start visualizing what they're wanting to do for their project, it's just going to be another project, and they're not going to have a purpose behind it. So that is another e-learning lesson I do. This one could be optional, but I also have the students kind of do a peer critique of this as well if we have time. If there's time in my class where, like that extra 5-10 minutes that you're like, whoa, got done with that lesson early, have them pull this out. Everybody have their screen up so you can kind of just do a walk around and say, hey, I really like this, or this could use some work on your dream board. So let's recap. So far, my health standards, I've already incorporated accessing resources. I've incorporated communication skills because we're getting some peer critiques. I've communicated, or I'm talked about decision making because they have to decide on what project, what avenue do they want to do. They are now looking at goal setting. I got to get this done by a certain time. And all over, they're advocating. We haven't really hit on analyzing influences a little bit, but we're going to get to that as we are taking in the research and core concepts. So I'm hitting all these standards that they're doing throughout the whole semester in just this one big project. So what's important? That's what my students always want to know. Hallman, just tell me what the most important stuff is, because I just need to get it done. I want to know what's important. So for me, I do a slide just so they kind of have an overview, so they have some idea. For me, their research on this project is 5% of their overall grade. Their health fair is 25% of their grade. For me, going standards-based, and I don't know how you'd grade, but I end up having each of the other standards as 10% of their overall grade. So like core concepts, or not core, analyzing influences is 10%, decision making is 10%. So whatever that assessment is that 10%. I really only take about 15 to 20 grades a semester. I love it. It's less grading, but it's very purposeful. Every assignment is so purposeful, and these kids need to understand that there is a reason behind what I'm doing. So the core concepts for me is 5%, and so they need to look at the history and the definitions. And this one is so hard for some of them because they're like, what else do you want to know? I need specifics. I don't know. Tell me what you need, what the students need to know. Our students get stuck in a machine. They just want to know this, 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 this. Tell me this, 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 this. Well, I want you to grow and learn and figure some things out, problem solving, decide. So I do put a little bit more onto their plate. Interactive piece for me is 20 points of their overall 25%. I like to look at images when I'm looking at their display boards. Stats, I expect my students to have a display board. I know some people may not agree with a tri-fold display board, but for me as a teacher, I am very purposeful on my auditory, my kinesthetic, and my visual. Like I need my students, and I try and hit all those learning styles when I teach, so when they teach, they need to hit those too. Some of the students at the elementary level are going to be that visual. They need to look at something, but if it's digital, they may not like it. If it's just listening to them and just having a conversation, or if they're a doer, that's why I put the interactive piece. They may not get to all of them every time to every student, but at least they have that arsenal of teaching to the elementary students rather than here's my project, this is what I'm going to do, and then that's all they have. I do expect my students to dress nice for their presentation. I don't like jeans when they're presenting, and meeting deadlines, and then local resources. So in the end, I also have this rubric for the students. A lot of them honestly don't care about the rubric. They prefer the other, but I do have quite a few that, not sure why that's on there, do like the actual detailed aspect of the rubric. Feel free to change, edit, look at this, and you're like, I don't know why she has that. But for me, it's helpful, it's accessible for them, and they're able to get some good feedback. So the next thing is research. I'm looking for those valid health resources, videos, articles, just not a generic Google search like I've mentioned already. And I do have them do a document example. So it's just like just a standard, here's where everything is. I like all their research turned in on my Google Classroom. So I'm able to find it and give them some feedback along the way. Why I like doing these little checks along the way is because they are getting constant feedback from me. Excuse me, they're getting constant feedback from their peers. And there's no one person ever doing a presentation and then you get to it and you're like, ooh, not sure if I like that idea. And it's too late because we've had those moments. My favorite part of this whole health fair isn't necessarily the health fair, it's the goal setting and interactive presentation. I use Benison Alperin's lesson planning for skills-based health education as inspiration for the SMART goal activity. I have my students take a self-assessment, and then they have to create a PowerPoint presentation and present to their peers. They have to choose 2 assessments that are weaknesses in their area, and then they have to create a SMART goal for each of those. But then they also have to create a SMART goal for their interactive piece. Because without me talking about the interactive piece, that one has got slipped through the cracks. first semester, did a horrible job of this. I'll be honest. I kind of had it slip through the cracks. Second semester, I was very intentional with this activity, and the interactives just went through the roof. So we had one person who was talking about character traits and characteristics that you need. And so he put all these characters down, and he said, he was asking the students, this was his idea from my goal setting presentation, not even my health fair presentation, his goal setting. This was the idea. He pitched it to the class, and he says, I have all these ideas, and I want to put all these character traits down on these blocks, and then they have to choose what they truly feel is the most important and put it on the bottom, because that's like the core, the base of who they are. And then the next layer. And so he showed us how this was going to be just a okay layer, and this was going to be like, it's kind of important, but not really. And this one's like, if I have that trait, it's, you know, great. If not, it's not. So he had the kids choose what was truly important, and he had character traits on both sides of these, so that way the kids could see, hey, I want to be trustworthy. I want to be happy. Those are on the bottom. That's what I am all about. And then he built them up from there. Loved it. Had this female, she had my plate, and she pitched to her peers that they were doing a sticker. She found these stickers online that had all the different food groups. I think it was on Amazon, and she was just gonna have the kids figure out which part of my plate it was on. My students, when she pitched this, they're like, it's too simple, we don't like it, and kind of ripped her apart, and she was really defeated. And I said, time out. And I was 100% on board with the students' information. And the kids are like, why is it's too simple? And I go, what grade are you presenting to? And they pause, and they're like, oh, we're presenting to first grade, aren't we? And I go, is it too simple for first graders now? They're like, no. And I go, too simple for high school? Yeah. And I go, remember your audience. It was the perfect teaching moment, because she knew her audience, whereas all the others were now sitting there going, mine's too difficult. My kids won't know what I'm doing because it's too higher level. That day I had at least 10 kids come back and be like, can I redo my pitch? And I said, no. I go, because let's still hear it, and let's help you simplify it. I had so many kids have some great ideas, but it was either too high or too low, and not enough grit and rigor, or even just some depth to it. And the kids, their peers, gave them feedback of like, here's what I love about it. Here's how it can improve. I wonder, what do you think? And it just went over so well. There were some days where I was sitting back going, I'm not fixing your project. You're standing up there fixing your project, or your peers are fixing your project. And it was amazing. So I highly recommend, if you need the information of how I set all that up, I'd be happy to share it with you, because it literally truly is my favorite unit, especially when a student goes, that was excellent scaffolding, Ms. Hallman. And I'm like, heck yeah, you even know what scaffolding is. Yes. So it's great when students really truly see your efforts in building up your final product. I'm big on giving my students work time. Too many times I think teachers fall short in this area. I really think it's important to give them time, allow them to go at their own pace. Some are like, can I do it at home? I'm like, I kind of want to see it. It's skills based. I know it's just skills of putting your project together, but sometimes it's more of, is this layout okay? Do you really think it's too much? And some of them get really wordy, some of them don't. But I do ask for them to have a lot of information. And why do I do that? It's because sometimes you want to hit this with one child. You want to hit stats with another child. You want to hit professions with another student. Because if you talk about the same thing every time, when they all come back and the teacher's like, what'd you learn about hygiene from Olivia over here? They're all going to say the same exact thing. But when my students can give them so many different topics to talk about, maybe it's one is about, you know, like hygiene with showering, and one was hygiene about brushing teeth, and another one was hygiene about washing your clothes. And so now they're having a better discussion with their peers and with their parents, rather than just, we all learned about the same thing and they were so robotic, it wasn't fun. So I do have them get a lot of information, put a lot of information on there, but I think it's so important for a wide variety of reasons. And so here's some more things. So this is the one thing that I will never not do with my students. I may cut corners on here and there, but this one's so important. I moved the desks so they were in a circular fashion around my room. I don't have a large room by any means, so we were cramped here. But I set up a mock health fair in the classroom. I had half go and the other half were my students. And I only give them about 1.5 to 2 minutes at most to present to their student. One, they have to know the information. Two, they have to be able to communicate it effectively and quickly, because I feel it's more important for these 30, say it's 30 elementary kids in 45 minutes to get through 20, 25 stations than just have them do a free-for-all for 35 minutes to 35 to 40 minutes. I mean, how many times when we were younger, you went someplace and you're like, hey, have fun, and there's your health, or there's your field trip. And you're like, okay, I wish somebody would have walked me through because I probably would have paid attention. And it stems from, and I'll be honest, the Smithsonian. Went to the Smithsonian on my, Washington, D.C. trip. I went to like 4 things because they were like the highlights, like the ruby gold or Wizard of Oz shoes and some Jackie O dresses. And that's all I wanted to see. I missed so many other amazing parts because nobody walked me through it. It's kind of that same idea as a health fair. I want kids to walk through it. I want kids to be engaged. So I had my students walk through and practice with each other, because if they can't talk to their peers, they're going to struggle talking to elementary students. But even more important, there were certain tips that I felt were so crucial to this process for my students. The first one is, when I said go, so many of them just started in and talking to them about their project that I stopped them and I said, whoa, is that how you talk to somebody? You just met somebody new for the first time. What are you going to do? And they were looking at me like, we should introduce ourselves? I'm like, yeah. Will a child pay more attention to you because now you know their name? Or if you don't know their name, will they even pay attention? If you engage the child and talking to them first, even by asking, how's your day going and what's your name, they're going to listen to you a little bit more. So I just didn't just teach them lifelong skills. I taught them how to communicate, which goes back to our health standards even more. So it's game day. I have my students talk, like I said, for about 1 minute to 2 minutes to the elementary students. I do rotate them in that orderly fashion I talked about. At first, my students were skeptical because they're going, you mean to tell me that I'm going to be talking to like 30 of them in a row, back to back to back to back? And I was like, yes. And they were like, we need water, which they totally forgot to do or bring. But they also then realized why I did that, because I had some kids who were so dynamic and engaging and they were doing all these cool, fun, interactive activities. And then I had some that were really quiet. And you know, and I know, it's like a carnival. Aren't you going to go to the interactive and fun activity? Heck yeah, you are. And they would have been swamped. And the other person who spent so much time working on the project would have seen 1 or 2 kids. So to me, it's really important to have all kids engaged at all times. As a high school teacher, I'm timing and rotating, also assessing students on their presentation skills. I can go around, I can monitor, but really my kids are so well behaved because I've set the expectation of here's what is expected of you. Each elementary class was there for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then another class came in. My high school students did miss their AM classes to travel to the elementary, so there's something, like I said, you'll want to talk to your administration about. Make sure you schedule breaks in between the classes. I kind of forgot about bathroom breaks. I'm used to not going, but my students weren't. And like I said, encourage a water bottle. And presenting to first and second graders, we sure found out you might want a chair to sit on. And it's not because we're lazy, it's because your back is killing you because they are so short and you're bending down to try and get that engagement in that eye level. So a lot of my kids struggled with that, but make sure you're just contacting the elementaries or whoever you're doing the health fair with. So as you can see, I gave some pictures. I'm going to check on my time here. I gave some pictures of you. Here was a student who did kindness and respect. This is one of my favorite ones. Jayla was amazing, and she drew the heart. And she had kids walk through the heart as she talked about each part of the heart and the purpose of the heart. She talked about what it, the function and how it helps your body. Connor did a great job with first aid. His interactive was showing kids how to properly put on bandages. We had another My Plate over here. He actually was having her put together the My Plate. Rafe over here was hilarious. I think he did probably like 500 push-ups that day. Luckily, he is a wrestler, so he was up for the task. And then, as you can see, other students walked around. One of my favorites was a student over here. He was so shy, so worried about this project, and yet he totally rocked it. Was probably one of the best spoken ones to the students, to the elementary students. He got down on their level. And because he was so soft spoken, it kind of calmed their like nervous energy. And Parker did a cootie catcher, you know, those like little what we used to do with like girls know what I'm talking about with like boys and stuff, but she did it more with guidance counselors and their rules. Do you talk to a guidance counselor with this? And then they flip up the thing. Another student talked about the white spots with strep throat, so she made a Play-Doh model. So as you can see, they kind of roamed around and I rotated them through to each of the different areas. Biggest thing I wanted to get back from my students was reflection. I had my students I asked them questions on how do you feel like you engaged with the students? How do you feel like they engaged with you? My elementary teachers really didn't know what to expect. And so I also emailed them to say, hey, how was the health fair? What would you change? What did you like? And most of them were like, we were so skeptical. I had this like 25-year veteran teacher. She walks in and I knew I had to impress her. And if I could impress her, I was golden. And she walked out going, I hope you're coming back next year. You are coming back next year, which I'm not coming back to their school. So in 2 years, she's gonna be so excited to see me again. She goes, this rocked. And it rocked because of a few things. One, it was organized. I'm super organized. That's kind of my specialty. But the other thing was, it was very intentional, very purposeful. You have to make sure that my students knew the vision, and it took a while, but I can't vomit a vision on them. I had to build a vision. And so please make sure if you're doing something like this for your class, it's very step by step. I tell my students ahead of time, trust the process. I know what's coming. I know what's best for you. I'm not going to give you everything, because the moment I give you everything, they get, extremely overwhelmed and they're not engaged and they shut down and they're like, I'm not doing it. What surprised you the most? A lot of them say the elementary students didn't talk or they did talk. But a lot of them also said, I did that and I didn't believe I actually could do something like this. So for me, it was it's super fun. It gets me out of my rut. I'm not grading the same project. I have the same topics, but I'm not grading the same projects. And so for some of us who do the same worksheet and we get really tired of doing the same thing over and over again, I kind of sit back and think, why did I do that? I'm grading the same vocab terms. I'm grading the same test answers. And I now am looking at projects and I may have the similar topic, same topic, but I'm not grading the same project. And so I have 100+ different projects to grade every semester, and it's different, it's fun, it's engaging, and it just makes me want to come to school more often and every day. Why wouldn't I? But you know what I mean. We get so like, here we go again, and it gets me out of my rut. So by doing this health fair, I will tell you, it has reignited my passion for teaching. I am super excited every day when we're working on the health fair and all my other projects and how I'm assessing and using skills-based. So please let me know if you have any questions on how to incorporate a health fair or some type of community outreach at your district, because I would be happy to assist. I hope you enjoyed my video and this workshop, and you have a wonderful day.